All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's board meeting, January 16th, 2023 of the MSA School Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First, let's start with our mission and vision, as well as our land acknowledgement.
Our vision is to be innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence for all students that creates well-rounded, lifelong learners and global citizens. Our mission is that we provide accelerated and inclusive curricula and instruction in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science. The land acknowledgement, we would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather is the land of the Ochate Shakawi, the people of the Seven Council Fires, and the Wapakute band. It is within MSA's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Indigenous peoples and their history with this land. MSA works to build relationships with Native American students and their families through academic pursuits and historical recognition.
Roll call, Wendell Sletton here, Isaac Leonardi.
Here.
Sarah Harms.
Here.
Karita Lozano.
Here.
Jules Kinkle.
Here.
Brian Lensmeyer. Hedel Patel.
Here.
Dan Ellingson.
Here.
Mary Yap.
Here.
Is there a motion to, can I motion to approve tonight's agenda? Is there a second?
I will second.
Brian seconds. Any, or for discussion, any kind of clarification, adjustments?
Do we want to put here to take out the 6 to 6:15?
We addressed that at the last one. I'll just follow up
Okay.
with, to make sure that we get this with Emma
Yeah.
to do that. Yep. And then I also want to separate the approval of the agenda with the conflicts of interest. Hearing no adjustments to the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Are there any conflicts of interest? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll approve, or I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Lozano. Is there a second?
Second that.
Discussion?
I would like to make a couple of amendments
Mm-hmm.
to, well, I would like to make a couple of clarifications on here and amendments. On number 7, I'm looking at page 4, at the bottom. In the financial report, it was listed as non-compliance, and here it's listed as incompliance, which, depending on how you
Oh,
read it,
yeah.
if you're, yeah, I think it needs to be listed as
So
non-compliance.
17.
Yeah, 7D.
So it's
One.
7D3, number
3,
1, that first sentence.
I, sorry. Instead of 3, I.
Yep.
And then the number 1. And you're saying it should read non-compliance rather than
Right.
in?
And actually, that should be II instead of III, because it goes from I to III. I didn't catch that the first, second, or third read through. I did it just now on the thing.
You just noticed that it was in pattern.
Yeah.
So right now
So
it's-
no instance of known incompliance, or it should read no
Non-compliance.
instances of known non-compliance. Incompliance to non-compliance.
would be non-compliance.
And then on page 5, sorry, this is the grammatical piece of me. Item E, I1. Reiteration that there is a plan set worth of what policies, just grade it a little bit. Can it read, there is a plan set of which policies are to be discussed?
Mhm.
I think is the intent of what that's supposed to say, but it's a little garbled. And I'm just asking for clarification because I was going back through some previous minutes trying to find names of this, and I'm wondering when we repeal a policy, especially because some of the policies we're repealing don't have MSBA numbers, can we put the title of the policy we repealed? Because there's no way to go back and find what policy 515A was regarding.
Yeah, I actually had that same thought while I was reading through the minutes and in the conversation, so I feel it would benefit us in our minutes to include the
I
titles.
think it would benefit us, I think it would benefit future boards as they look back
Mhm.
and try and find.
No, that makes sense.
And
Did you-
then on page 11, item number 3, policy 504, discussion, I think there's just a typo there.
Oh, in the motion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it says typo of 2BB6 on page 2. And it was all, the current read is tan
Current
tops
read
instead
is
of
tan
tank tops. So, and when I went back and looked, it was 2B6,
Oh,
and we put in the second B, I'm like, there is no 2BB6.
So it should be 2B6 instead of 2BB6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So take out
Under 3,
page 11,
page 11, yeah.
in the motion.
Under the discussion and in the motion.
Okay.
I also had an addition, if you're done, Mary.
Well, and I have one other typo. Page 15, January 3rd. Third, TH. And I didn't go back and,
Mhm.
it's, yeah, it's 31st,
E6.
I believe. It's
I
the-
wasn't, I'm like, I think it's the 31st, but I don't know if she means
It's the
that or the
31st.
3rd.
Yeah.
31st.
And mine was on page 7.
And then I have,
Oh,
oops.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then on page 17, and I did go back and I double checked the transcript on this. But the out of order call was actually not made. The quote was, "I might have to call you both out of order." So, just so that we make sure that we're reflective.
Mhm.
There was not an actual out of order call, at least not in the recording or on the transcript.
With that said, we both reflected on the incident and we're willing to move forward, correct?
Yeah. I don't know if this is the time to do that.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. I mean, we acknowledge what was said, what was done, and we can move forward in this instance. On page 7, I was looking at the last motion to repeal 802. In the discussion, it says the policy is legislative. Should that be is not legislative and more of an administrative role? Because if it's legislative, then we have to keep it.
Well, yes, but this is where, to Mary's point, it would be helpful to remember what policy that
Yeah.
one was.
Where?
802, page 7.
I think it meant to say this policy, no,
Is not legislative.
I don't think it meant to.
802 is, deposit of obsolete equipment and material.
I think it meant to say, although this policy is legislative,
It's not a charter school policy is I think what it was. I mean, that's what I recall of the discussion. I don't.
Yeah, I think in the discussion, we put, it's legislative.
I think we need to follow up on that and
Yeah.
make that reflect what it truly should be.
This is from.
So
when do
it's-
Oh, go ahead.
do we want to just table it till later?
Or do we want to take the time and fix
Mhm.
it? Do we have the minutes from the,
Here, I'll get it.
Oh.
Oh, let me take you.
It's actually statutory requirements that are directed to admin. So to have this policy at the board level, when it's really a charge on the director to handle these materials.
I'm looking more for
Which-
clarification.
Is it the obsolete materials though? Because
Oh, am I
that
looking at their
802 is the obsolete materials,
Uh-huh.
or equipment, which
Right.
we couldn't find a reference to charter school law for that. That's why we repealed
Okay.
that one.
So then let's look at it. Yeah, there is not
It's not-
there is not a charter school.
I think it's legislative for regular
For regular
ISDs, but
district.
not for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, it's all to 123B 13.
So the way that it's
District
written
bulletin.
reflects the way it should.
I wonder if it should
The
say it's
phrasing
not
again?
legislative
To charter school,
for charter schools. Or we could just hold that one and go back and review what was actually said, because what we're trying to do now here is record what was actually
Yes.
Remember
said.
what we
So-
said, we said
Not what
legislative
should
and
have
for
said.
admin to handle, not a charter policy to go with this. If the policy doesn't come forward, we can add to it, modeled after district in 1995.
Okay,
So
then
we
that-
did say it was legislative.
So I think we need to add then, this policy is legislated but not specific to charter school policy.
I think though it does. So it reads, this policy is legislative and more of an administrative role. There is not a legal reference. The committee felt that it was an administrative role and there was not any current policy that
Okay.
reflects charter school law.
Okay.
So I think that might be correct. It's just
All
awkward.
right, yeah, just the way I read it, it's
Really
like,
awkward.
okay. So I'm fine with it now that we understand. I just wanted to double check. Okay.
No, I almost say maybe we should just look at it again, because the insurance posting policy, maybe we should just.
It's
So-
repealed right
Then you
now.
have
We-
to
we're
bring
just-
it
we're
forward
asking,
to the
yeah.
February meeting because.
Yeah, we're just asking what was said at the meeting, so if we want to bring this back to governance, that's, I mean, as
We can
the chair,
certainly
you
look at
can
it
bring
again
that
at the
back.
governance level
Yeah.
if we think we should.
Yeah, because there is no model charter policy.
So keeping to this is okay. I think, Hedel, if you want to, as the chair of that committee, bring that back to the table, and we'll go forward with that. Okay, any other corrections? All right, and to Mary's point of the out of order, the narrative did state that, so it should reflect it. It says, correct me, Mary, I may need to call you out of order, both out of order on this, is that what I said?
Yes, that's,
So page 17,
but there was never a call out
Yep.
of order.
so Lozano, do you approve the November minutes with the additions and clarifications? Page 4, number 7, I mean, there's a lot, but let's make sure. 7D3.1, financial report should be 2 and read in compliance and should be non-compliance. Page 5, 7E1 should be there's a planned set of which policies are to be discussed, not what policies. We should go reflect in our minutes that the names of each policy as stated. Page 11, number 3, 504, take out the B on discussion and motion. Page 15, E6, January 31st, instead of 3rd or 3th. Page 17 should reflect, I may need to call you both out of order. All right. All in favor? Aye. Against? Abstained?
I will abstain.
All right. So our board and administration reports, let me pull up my here. So a couple of things from the board level. Our mid-year survey update will be sent out tomorrow and will run for 2 weeks. That will be going through our info at MNMSA website, our web address, and we look forward to hearing from our community as how we're doing this year. At the time when I issued this agenda, there was no authorizer update, but as you may have received yesterday, we did receive a renewal update from SAMS. I would like to just kind of quick talk about that, as the board did not have enough time to read through and really take into what was being said. So we will talk more about that at our workshop in February. I would like to announce that we did receive a 3-year renewal contract through SAMS, and we are pleased to continue with our partnership with SAMS. Couple of the great highlights that we heard from SAMS was that MSA continues to outperform the rest of the school districts at the state average in reading and math. We continue to perform the state average in reading, math, science proficiencies for 4 consecutive years, ranking in the top 10 of all high schools in the state, with students averaging 20% higher than most of the average of the state assessments. Students consistently perform substantially higher than the state in the ACTs, with a composite score of 5.7 points higher than the state average. Our graduation rates at 95%, where the state average is 84. MSA was recognized by MDE as a highly qualified charter school in 2020, 2021, and 2022. MDE did not issue high quality designations in 2023. And MSA was recognized as one of the top charter schools in the state by US News and World Report for 4 consecutive years. So there's some great achievements. There are a number of areas of growth that SAMS would like us to address over the next 3 years, well, sooner than later. And we look forward to working with SAM to continue this growth. A couple of things, mainly is our governance. In the last 5 years, SAMS has noted a number of deficiencies through law and policy, as well as breaches of fiduciary duties and the dysfunctional operation. So those are some things that we need to really address and address them quickly. As you are aware, we have brought on a number of resources such as Teamworks to improve our governance, and we look forward to continue working on that. We need to address more of closing the gap between our students of color and our white students. I think this is an area of growth statewide and nationwide, but it is something that we as a board need to really focus attention to. And as we pursue expansion, we need to ensure that we're meeting state and local requirements, so that we are as successful as possible in our expansion process. And then fully understanding our contract with SAM. I think that this is something It's been overlooked by a number of us, and I think it's our time to really hone in on that and really understand what it is we have this agreement on. As the board stated or knows, they were issued a statement. We will get the letter from Sam's out as quickly as possible. There was just some legal questions that we wanted to follow up with the attorney before sending it out. Okay. Dr. Hinton, do you want to touch on anything?
I just wanted to say that we are, as an admin team, very excited to continue to work with Sam. That was something that we have valued. Our admin team is, I talked about it with them this morning when we met. They're all very excited to continue this work and continue. We're looking forward to the added accountability. I think that that will help us make the changes that we need to. And so I think that that and the added support with Sam will assist us in that, and with Teamworks. So we're excited about it, and
We really
We're looking
appreciate the
forward to it.
accountability.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that we all of us need it, and I think it's useful to have that defined period of time to get
Mhm.
tasks completed and get the work done. I feel like everyone at the board table is ready, willing, and able to complete this work, and as the admin team, we're ready to do that as well.
Which leads us to board development. Our next workshop, I had the date in my head and it just all of a sudden slipped.
February 6th.
February 6th, thank you, Mary. Between now and then, I would ask that we all take some time to reflect on the renewal update that was sent out yesterday, as well as the update from Christine in reflecting on what we did at our last workshop. As you do that, if you've noticed in the update that we provided, if there's something that we have been working on that you feel is unrecognized in the statement, this is going to be a working document for us as we move forward to show hey, this is really what we're trying to strive for here. This is really what we've done. These are our accomplishments. Here's our growth plan. So I'd ask that you take that time to reflect both on Christine's document and this one, as we kind of continue to develop more of an ongoing plan as how to improve our governance. PD report?
I'm sorry, just to clarify, the working document is the one with Christine, correct?
No, the working document will be a renewal update. We'll take
Okay,
that
gotcha.
table and we'll make that into a separate document,
Thank you.
and that will continue to develop as the year progresses.
Okay. I just wanted to give, I think everybody got an expansion update. I emailed one to everyone, I think, and hopefully those are useful. I'm trying when I have some level of information. I'm gonna work on, I think, maybe bi-weekly board updates where I can just fill you in on the stuff that's been going on, not just around expansion, but there's a lot of things that we're doing here, and in order to be efficient at the table, I think that would be, I'm hoping that would be something that you would want. If it's, weekly seems a lot. Every other week seems like I can, I don't know, every other, and I'll have to figure out what day works. I send out other communications on Thursday or Friday. It may be Thursday or Friday every other week, but I'm still continuing to work on that. So for expansion, for the lease update, we, as you all know, in November, I was empowered to start working on negotiating a lease. There's been a number of things that we've had to work through. Mr. Ellingson and I have been meeting with NTH and have had some great conversations. We worked with our attorney. We made a proposal to the property owners. This weekend, we got a request for financial data, which we provided with them yesterday, so they did not out of hand reject our proposal for how we would do the lease. They wanted to know more about us. They also don't know much about how charter schools in Minnesota work. I was sending the information to an office in New York City. It's a big conglomerate, so I worked with our real estate agent to get that information out. They wanted like 3 years of audits. They wanted to know how charter schools are funded, that sort of thing. So we sent that out to them. Hopefully we'll hear something back from them soon in terms of whether or not they're willing to engage in updating their lease with Rasmussen, with the other property. So we'll keep you posted as we find that's changing rapidly. Our property search, 10 properties were presented and under consideration for our expansion committee on January 4th. We met, we reviewed a lot of them, we reviewed all of them. There were some that were more promising than others. There were 3 properties in Woodbury that were possibilities but have challenges. So we're still looking at those. We won't know much about those for a little bit. There's one promising property in Woodbury. However, it requires a change to the comprehensive plan, which is different than zoning. So we would have to go to the city and ask them to run plumbing and utilities to that site, which is a little bit more of a hurdle than just a zoning change. There's 2 properties in Cottage Grove, right on the Cottage Grove-Woodbury border, that are promising. One of them, the city of Cottage Grove, requested that we build a school there. So they see us as a cornerstone for the development that they want to do in that area. It is, it's very close to Woodbury. So the committee liked that it was also central to the district. And then there were 3 other properties in Cottage Grove that the committee did not like. They were way south in the district, and that would make, it's a long ways from here. And then there was one property in Woodbury that the committee wanted to put on the back burner. Since then, Woodbury has given us a hard no on that property, so that is now off the table. Like there's typically they've been like, well, maybe. This one they're like, no, no school will go there. So that is not going to be a possibility. So we're going to continue to work the list and give updates as we know.
I'm glad to hear that there's options, because I think it was 2-3 years ago, they were like, nope, there's no options. It's
Just a bit, kind of.
Yes,
comment
please,
a little bit.
please.
So, one of the things that I pressed, and I'm not the board, I was just one, but I said, what I think as an individual would be nice is if we can get in front of the board with a few options, maybe not 10. So if they can help us, I mean, if it's, they're the experts, right? But if they can come with a few, we can have a discussion here and try to move forward, because the point that I was trying to share with them is that 26 date of move-in, let's say that doesn't move, but if we keep every month and month and month wait, then we're just gonna keep, it's gonna compress the schedule such that somewhere the shortcut's gonna eat us or burn us, right? So we need to get, I feel like it seems like a long ways away, but we really need to get going on something here. So the recommendation actually was, if they are able to, please come before the board at our February meeting. And we discussed it briefly, we think it might be a closed session, just because if you specifically talk about properties, then it needs to be closed. If it was just a general philosophical discussion about expansion, that's open, but this one would be maybe 3 properties, and we can talk about what looks good and empower them to push a little bit harder on actual prices and whatnot, so we can move. That's one thing.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have another person at the table, so.
And when you say they, you mean NTH?
It was NTH, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they're, what would you call it, like, real estate lady's
Yes.
name is Tina.
Tina.
And she is the one chasing down all these questions, so I just asked her if she could chase them a little bit faster, because she's doing a great job.
Yeah.
And sometimes she's waiting for responses, but we need those
We don't want to
answers.
get caught holding the bag either.
What's that?
We don't want to get caught holding the bag where.
Yeah, I mean, we don't wanna wait 6 months or whatever. I'm biased because I've been waiting maybe 6 years or now, but,
Right.
but many years, so I feel this sense of urgency.
And I would like, before your board term is done, for you to be able
That would be
to
great.
get inside of a new building.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been working this a long time, so.
And it's not easy, and so, it's different public versus private as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mary has a question.
Can I ask just for clarification, because you've used this term intermingling, and I want it for my own brain. But you mentioned that the expansion committee met, but then you also mentioned that the expansion committee met, you and Dan met with NTH, so
Okay.
so what's the difference between
Thank you for asking.
the big group that the board appointed people to be on and the small group, because we've now heard this, I've heard the same term
Yes,
used to
so,
reference both, and I'm getting confused.
so there is a larger committee made up of teachers and parents, and there's some students, although they are often busy. So we meet and talk about, and they get updates, and then they went through and looked at the properties and gave us feedback on that. So that is that group.
And is
we-
that named what?
The
Well, that's
facilities
Facilities
committee.
committee.
Okay,
So, I mean, we've kind of used the term, and we should be a little more precise on it, but that's that committee. Dan and I meet with NTH most Fridays. And so then we're getting the nitty gritty on
Mhm.
construction, what's going on, just the real, and that's typically a 45-minute to an hour call, depending on how much information we have. They're giving us the updates, asking for information, that kind of thing. I mean, I met today with Tina and her assistant, the real estate agent and her assistant, so that we could go over what data I needed to provide, and then get that done. So, there's a lot of different kinds of meetings going on, but there's that small group, which is, maybe we should just call that the project group, I don't know.
Sure.
The project
Project
group,
managers, or,
yeah.
you guys can think about it.
Yeah, so then maybe that would be helpful,
well,
because,
and I wasn't sure because the larger group had been called the expansion committee.
Yes.
And then it changed names and it was the facilities committee, but now we refer to them again as expansion, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Yep, so we'll work on that.
We just
Yeah.
Language.
I'll
Yeah.
tighten up the language, and I don't know, I kind of feel like we moved it to facilities because we were talking about merger for a while there,
Mhm.
right? And then it was just facilities that we were talking
no,
about.
it
Because
all
there
makes
needed to be
sense,
a
I'm
website,
just,
But maybe we just go back to expansion, because that's really kind of,
it's kind of where we're at.
yeah, I don't know.
So next
So-
steps on expansion, we have our town hall tomorrow,
Yep,
and then after the town hall, we'll be updating the website to reflect what was
Yeah.
given at the town hall, so everybody has access to that. We'll also be including a Q&A in that part of the website, so
Yeah.
that way we kind of have some universal language as far as how to answer certain questions. And so everybody has access to that information.
Speaking of tomorrow night's town hall, I had something come up that I need to
Okay.
not be at tomorrow night, so there's a board's position open if somebody wants to.
and I think
We,
everyone
we
is
can all be
invited.
there, because we're not
Okay.
making decisions, it's just,
So everyone is welcome to come. And there'll be other things so once we will have an overview market analysis tomorrow, there'll be a deeper one that I'll share with the board as soon as that's completed. We also, if we can reach an agreement on the terms of the lease that are within the parameters that we decided, then I will engage our accounting firm to do the really deep dive on the budget. There's a fee involved with that, so I don't wanna keep doing it over and over again. Well, what if we tried this? Well, what if we tried that? So we have some real idea, so that as I get all that information, I know we have the expansion brief, but I may just package it up or send it to you as I get it, so you have a chance, cause it's a lot to digest. Because with any luck, we'll be making a decision on the leased property in February, provided everything is lining up, because we really, as a school, need to make that decision so we can plan for next year. So we have to start, working on busing and all.
So are you anticipating that the February 6th workshop will potentially have a special meeting attached to it?
No, no.
That's,
no.
okay.
I
I'm just
mean,
looking
no,
at calendars and trying to figure out.
No, I feel like that's gonna be too rushed, however, you may be getting information around that time.
Okay.
We won't hold it for the board packet, I'll send it to you as I get it, because it will be a lot. And I will let you know, as I get updates. This is one where I know I wanna keep it to bi-weekly, but this is one where I feel like this is a bigger thing, so we might be getting updates more weekly on expansion as things are happening.
community engagement.
Community engagement, so I wanna keep this moving along. We had a coffee with the executive director, last week. We have another one, February 13th in the morning. This afternoon, we had the student town hall. We didn't get any students. We sent out a reminder, we did the announcements. So we did meet with, Josh Bellamy, who did come, who's one of our reps, and I'm gonna be talking with him a little bit more on how we get some student feedback, because
He gave some really great insight on
he's
how
got
to
some
do
really
that.
good ideas on how we can engage with the students, so I really still wanna get that feedback, so we're gonna work on how to do that. We're still trying to figure out, we're trying different things with community engagement, and we're gonna try and see what actually works to get that feedback from our broader community.
And the expansion town hall we touched on.
Yes, the expansion town hall tomorrow night, I hope a lot of people come, if they don't, I will still have all the materials and send them out to the community, later in the week. Next thing, the enrollment options, I've got 2 different proposed, I don't know that we can really, typically in January, we vote for the lottery, how many people we will accept, since we don't know how many spaces and what we're gonna be doing. The minimum would be without the leased property, how many students we would accept, that's, letter B. And then if we did get the leased property, that would be option A, is what I'm proposing. We approved the lottery in February, so at that time, we'd probably have to approve it, probably have to approve the numbers and then approve the lottery at the same time.
Would it be possible in February, when we see these numbers again, to maybe have the projected PSEO as well? Just historically and or what may be already available with, just so we can kind of get a feel for what
Yeah.
those numbers will look like.
Yeah, I guess it would be.
Because that's what hit us last year.
Yep,
So
and
we
it,
wanna
and
make
we've
sure-
got it in some other documents, so I can
Yeah.
just share that out again with you. It's looking different because of our contract with Century, but bodies in the building
Yeah.
will make a difference.
Do we know how many people have applied for the lottery at this point? Just out
Just
of
got
curiosity.
numbers this today. I think we were over 400, but I'm not looking right at it. Is that what it was, Caitlin? Yeah.
It's like 417, 425.
Yeah, we're at or ahead of our typical applications at this point.
So,
Go ahead.
You don't need it approved tonight? Like, we didn't have it on the agenda for approval?
I mean, if the board's more comfortable, we can approve the without lease property so that we know how, but we can't approve with the lease property if we don't have a lease property, so that's the
Just-
question.
Okay.
And I don't
really
know.
have it on here, but I'm just wondering if we could approve the with lease property if we move forward with the lease. I don't know, just to give you some options, but
Well, don't we have the lottery drawing on February 12th?
Yes.
Which is,
It's before our
Right,
board
the
meeting.
workshop is the
Yeah.
6th.
So typically at the 20th meeting, the 20th of February, you would approve the lottery. We would have to approve the lottery, well, first we'd have to approve the numbers.
this is
And
on the
lottery.
12th now, right? No,
Yeah.
February 12th this year?
Yep, so we do the drawing, but it's not official until the board approves it.
Correct, but the number is usually known, right? Is it not?
I don't know if it's open this year, because I think it's only if you're present. I'm okay to do either one. I'm comfortable telling people that they got in on the leased property or
Correct.
kinda
Yeah,
doing
agreed.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, without the leased property, we can know that these kids are gonna get in and let them know, and then let the other students know that there's a good chance they would get in. I just don't wanna take away anybody's opportunity if this lease does not pan out the way we hoped it would.
I don't know if you're okay with more discussion, but I mean, I feel like we should have some answers for those parents that wanna know where their kids are going on the normal schedule, so that makes sense to me. But I do have a question of, 50, is it 50 more kids, or are we at we're at 650 right now, is that right?
We're at 663, so that would be
663.
31 more. We've got some ways, we've worked through how to make that happen.
Okay,
It's not gonna be comfortable.
yeah,
But we've got a way, because a lot of them are PSEO. We have a number of periods of time when classrooms are open, that teachers are doing interventions, that we're looking at how we do that differently, so we can use those classrooms during that time. I think we will be okay for next year. It's not gonna be easy if we don't have a lease space, and then the following year, it's gonna
Maybe a
be
different
really
way to
tight.
ask it is, do we need to push it, or why do we need to push it? I have some thoughts, but I mean, because what would happen if we kept it at the same number? I mean, our
So
facilities
this,
haven't
these
changed.
numbers right here are just continuing with what we've, the growth is only coming in the fact that there's so many 11th and 12th graders, which is part of where we ran into, I think, the PSEO thing came
Yeah.
up short because we kept historical numbers instead of proportionally growing it. So in order to keep it the same number we have now, we'd have to reduce the 9th grade back down to 90 some. And then that would cause us to have to try and grow it later, cause it would make it harder to hit
So
our.
it is the pre-building for the anticipated expansion, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just kind of have to suffer through it for the next, till 26, really, right?
Right, but it
The
continues.
lease will help if we get that.
If we get the
Yes.
lease, then it will reduce a lot of that pressure.
Because I have voted in the past to add more, because every year I'm optimistic, we're gonna expand it.
Right.
And we haven't yet, so I'm not saying we won't, we've done this path before,
Yeah.
so
I
many years.
know, cause I feel like it's Groundhog Day, I feel like we were here
Yes,
last year and we
I
were doing the
voted
same
for
thing.
Another 50 kids, and we still haven't expanded.
Yeah, so this is only 30 more kids. Still a lot of
At
kids.
least 100 over what we probably should be though, but anyways.
Yeah, 550 is about the comfortable amount here,
I guess the
500,
question would be, are we in violation of any fire code?
no.
That was my next question.
No, we're okay with that, we had our full fire
My
marshal was up
classroom
in
is
here.
Do they
Um,
see?
they
sorry,
went
this is
through
digressing.
everything.
Do they see the passing time as well? I mean, that's what I always hear is, it's impossible to walk through some of
The
these.
passing
areas.
time's gotten better
It
since we've
has,
moved
Okay.
split the middle school and the high school.
Good.
So that's helped that's not really a fire code thing, it's just a comfort thing. But I don't know, Isaac, you're down in the annex, how does it feel down there this year? Well, you weren't there last year,
I'd
but,
say like a quarter of the time it's bad. So usually it's fine, but one of the passing times it's bad, and then the rest of the whatever the schedules are, it's okay. More often than not, but there's one time a day each hour it's bad,
okay.
but everyone makes it still.
We have to trust administration with the numbers. You guys are coming with what you feel we need, and I'm just
Yeah.
asking, do we need
But
those?
We need a commitment to get this expansion done though, because if every year we do this, I mean, at some point, we get to a point where,
And is it at all padding the budget? I'm just asking because, I mean, the more kids we have, the more money we have, I got it. But is this for money or is it more for the building of the expansion?
the reason why I would like to keep this like this is not, I mean, the money helps, and
Of course.
money's always good. I mean, we have plenty of need to spend the money on. If we drop the 9th grade number down, which is the only way, to not add up to the 115 that we've been doing, then we end up with a small class. And then we're gonna have to add students, a larger number of students partway through high school, which we know our students do much better when they come in at 6th grade or at 9th grade. If they, if we get a large number coming in 11th grade, then we have problems in terms of getting them on track to graduate, then we have to start thinking about what are we at, making special accommodations, and students that, if you're trying to get a large number of students in upper high school, you're tending to get students, you have a higher likelihood of getting students that have had some significant issues in their previous high school. Which, I mean, we're ready, willing, and able to accommodate. It's just, I would prefer to have them come up in a cohort, so we can get them all on board, and we're not having kids coming in that are credit deficient, and, having to do a lot of that scrambling. I mean, we can do that, it's just in terms of trying to build a system that works better.
So can I get a feel, to maybe, do we need to amend the agenda to approve at least the without?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So just a general consensus, do we feel like we should do that
Yeah.
tonight?
I can
Or is
make
there?
a motion to add that.
Do you wanna do the motion
So we have to
after I
motion
finish the
to,
report?
yeah, we will, but motion to amend the agenda to include the approval of,
Okay.
Decision and discussion, what would that be, E? I guess?
yeah.
Just hold on, until she's done.
I'll just quick get through that, we're almost done, and then it won't be weird in the minutes halfway through the
Yep.
report. The next, you can just kind of look at it, it's the strategic plan dashboard update. We are in green for most of Success for All students. Our PLCs are completing learning targets for each course and developing formative and summative assessments. So that's yellow, it's in progress. We were due to have that done by the end of the year. We are on track to have that done. We've started looking at graduation requirements and planning and preparing for new state mandates. Also starting to have some conversations around, now that we have 8 periods, 8 credits a year, is 21.5 credits to graduate sufficient, because it's not proportionately growing. So as a academics committee and admin team, we've been starting to look at some proposals. It would not be if we were to up the number of credits to graduate, it would be primarily for the students who are not currently in high school, and maybe a credit or 2 added to the kids currently in 9th grade. Students currently in 10, 11, 12, the admin team is not recommending changing any of their credits for the requirements for graduation. So that's something that we're working on. We're not ready to bring that forward, but it's something that's in progress. On organizational support of MSA mission and vision, the main thing that we're working on right now is getting that survey out. It's due to go out tomorrow. Fingers crossed, we don't have any technical issues, and it'll go out tomorrow, but it will be open for 2 weeks. And we will send out multiple reminders for parents to get that done, because we'd like to keep a high, get a high number of people giving feedback. Facilities and infrastructure, we've already talked a lot about that. We're making progress to get towards a building open in fall of 2026. That's a year behind what we had originally hoped, but hopeful that we will get that done in that time frame.
Is bullet 2 supposed to be?
It's, for some reason, that's in that part of the strategic plan. I don't know why.
The strategic plan that was never approved, but that one are you talking about? Because I know I've asked that question too, about how some things are in there.
I mean, I did not write that strategic plan, but what I will say is at the board at the time, they felt that it was important to identify the buckets, and that the administration was supposed to fill in how we were gonna get to those goals. At some point, they put in that we wanted to do some more social emotional learning screenings coming out of COVID. We have not really figured out how to do that in a way that is beneficial to students and protects this is some more psychological information about the kids, so how do we collect that? We've been doing lessons every week in advisory, and so that's been how we've been addressing it right now, but we have not started doing those screenings at this point.
That just raised my eyebrows, like, wait a minute, that doesn't feel like.
It's kind of weird,
facilities
when I
and
was,
infrastructure, is that where it's supposed to be? So,
and then Give to the Max, this is just an update. Money still continues to come in, but we got $26,096 were donated to the annual fund. There was a $15,000 music donation, and another $7,115 that were targeted to specific extracurricular activities. So the total is listed on here, but we were, comes out to nearly $50,000 in donations. So we were very pleased with that. And human resources transactions, we've hired 2 coaches for robotics, and so those are listed there. And the one other thing that's not listed on this update is our authorizers coming for our site visit on January 30th. That's our typical annual visit. So we're looking forward to welcoming Ms. Wynn to show off what we're doing here at the school. So that's the end of my report. So if you want to make a motion before we forget.
Dan, would you like to propose the motion?
Yeah, I would just like to propose that we I guess
Amend the
discuss and
agenda.
decide, amend the agenda for 8E to include a vote on enrollment options for 24.
Dan, I think you were posing the idea of a conditional.
It's an option one, but we also, yes, I was, and we can discuss that when we take it again.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's, let's leave it at 24, 25, and then we can maybe work in a conditional on it.
So motion to amend agenda to include 8E. To include 8E. Votes for enrollment options.
I think it's the lottery.
Wanting
The
a
lottery.
minimum of staying on site,
Can we maybe just,
approving the minimum of staying on site,
for the
right?
agenda, we'll just talk through the 24, 25 enrollment option?
I think if you just say 24, 25 lottery,
Lottery, sure.
That's
yeah,
what we've had in
fine.
the
So we're just making the motion to add an element
Yeah,
to
and
the
then we'll
agenda,
discuss
it
and then we'll
later.
do that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So to include lottery options, yep. Proposed by Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Tinkle. Further discussion, so this is just to get it on the agenda. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. And then when we get there, we can make the motion to approve it. Yep. Thank you, Dan. All right, a lot of information from the ED on that, so let's go on to the financial committee. I'll leave it to Isaac, who will pass it off to Dovo.
All right, we'll start with our audit presentation right away.
Awesome, perfect. So my name's Tyler C. I'm an audit manager at Abdo, and I've been doing the financial statement audit for math and science the last couple of years. I think this is my second year here presenting the audit. So what this presentation is it's more of a high-level overview of the financial statement audit. Don't get too far into the details, but kind of give you those points that we think that you guys should all be aware of for this year. So just getting right into it, the kind of what I'll be going over today, if you want to go to that next slide there. First of all, I'll be going over our responsibility as auditors as well as our audit opinion. I'll then go over the general fund results for fiscal year 23, as well as your building company fund. And then we ended with what we like to call key performance indicators. So the audit results, so our responsibility as auditors is to issue an opinion on the school's financial statements. We are issuing an unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit opinion. So in your situation would be the opinion you're striving for. Also throughout the audit, we do testing around Minnesota legal compliance, so testing around state statute. We have no instances of non-compliance noted for the fiscal year 23 audit. So all in all, clean audit, clean opinion, no non-compliance noted. This next slide here just kind of highlights the ADM for Math and Science Academy for the last 5 fiscal years. So for fiscal year 23, you had a jump in your ADM ending at about 543, whereas the year before you were at 497, or 498 basically. Just highlighting the ADM quick. Next, going into the general fund balances for the last 3 fiscal years. Here what we're looking at is Math and Science's general fund balance as compared to, as a percentage of your general fund expenditures and your general fund balance policy. So the school's fund balance policy is to maintain a fund balance at 25% of your expenditures. And at fiscal year 23, at the end of the year, your fund balance is at 35.4% of expenditures. So consistent with the last 3 years, you've been meeting and exceeding that fund balance policy in your general fund. Next, looking at budget to actual results. So on this slide, on the very far left column, you'll see your original fiscal year 23 budget. And then we show the amount that the budget was amended for revenues and expenses. And then that middle column is your final fiscal year 23 budget. And then your actual results and the variance with that budget. So for fiscal year 23, your revenues were over budget by almost $300,000. Main reason for that would be more state aid received than in that final budget. And then your expenditures were also over budget by about $260,000. Couple main categories for that budget variance is more expenditures in special ed than budgeted, as well as more expenditures in sites and buildings than budgeted. So that'd be stuff like your lease payments, consulting fees, utility fees, that kind of thing. So all in all, your fund balance in the general fund did decrease about $43,000. And that $2,360,000 amount at the bottom, that's your year-end fund balance in the general fund. This is looking at general fund revenues per ADM for state sources, federal sources, and then local sources. So the orange bar is fiscal year 23 Math and Science Academy, and then the yellow bar is fiscal year 2022 Region 11, which is other charter schools in your region of the state. And then, just realized that says 2021, should say 2022 statewide average, so statewide charter school average. So 2022 numbers are the most updated, comparison numbers we have. So this shows math and science is below average in state and federal sources per ADM. Every school has a different story, but generally the main indicators for that would be less special education students and less compensatory aid for free and reduced lunch. Those are kind of the two main indicators typically. And then local sources a little bit above that, those averages there.
Would you say that that's average for most typical charter schools? Or what's your experience with that knowledge?
To be below state and federal.
Yeah.
So I think what I see is a lot of charter schools more so in the metro kind of drive up that average, like kind of the inner cities charter schools kind of drive up that average, I would say. So most of the charter schools I work with do kind of see a little bit below average in state and federal sources, and most are kind of similar in local sources. So I guess this is a pretty typical variance I see,
Okay.
if that makes sense. We're gonna have a few slides like this that just kind of show expenditures and kind of a percentile view of the state. So the orange line is Math and Science Academy. Your total general fund expenditures per ADM for the last 4 fiscal years. Then that gray shaded area is the 25th to 50th percentile in the state for general fund expenditures per ADM. And then the light gray is the 51st to 75th percent. And then the yellow line is the statewide average. Again, in fiscal year 23, we don't have the actual comparison numbers, so we're kind of doing a projection there. But what this one shows is Math and Science Academy is in a lower percentile, maybe the 10th to 15th percentile in the state for total expenditures per ADM in your general fund. Next one is again looking at general fund expenditures, but breaking it down by object codes and kind of how that money is being spent. So the 4 categories we're looking at here is salaries and wages, benefits, purchase services, and supplies. So kind of looking at the trend in the last few years, you see that salaries and wages allocation increasing a little bit, and kind of the purchase services allocation, kind of decreasing. Otherwise pretty steady in supplies and benefits. This is just a quick slide that highlights the building company fund. The top half of the slide just shows your building company fund balance change between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 22. And then that bottom graph is just a schedule showing your future principal and interest payments, which just stays steady, just under $500,000 a year, and then the lease revenue coming into for that payment. Just shows the next 10 years. So earlier we talked about the general fund balance as a percent of expenditures being at 35%. So now here what we're doing is just comparing that to statewide average and Region 11 average, and again, just charter school averages, not school districts as well, just charter schools. So this shows Math and Science Academy being at 35% is above the average for statewide in Region 11. And then a couple more of these percentile view graphs, but focusing on specific departments here. So here what we're looking at is your elementary and secondary regular instruction costs per ADM. And this one, again, fiscal year 23 is really only a projection, but about in the 25th percentile in the state in this category of expenditures per ADM. And then the next one shows your special education costs per ADM. And here, in a lower percentile, here, 10th, 15th percentile, something in that range for math and science. So I believe that's my last slide, so I'll just open it up for any questions or comments about the presentation, audit report, anything like that.
Are there any questions? I know I could have interrupted and said mine. I know, Mary, you had some questions about it at the last meeting, but I think they were answered by Isaac through the finance committee meeting. Did you get your
I have one
answers?
while you look.
Go ahead.
Any opportunities you see, seeing as how you look at other charter schools, anything we're doing that we could be doing different?
You know, at least from a financial perspective, the thing I always look at is your fund balance level. Your fund balance is pretty good at 35%, it's above your policy, so I feel like financially, pretty healthy school. So nothing really comes to mind, probably not a super helpful answer, but I would say this charter school is financially healthy.
If we know we're doing expansion soon, is there any other thing we have to consider going for the future?
I mean, I'm assuming you're discussing this in your expansion
Right.
committee and stuff like that, but I mean, the funding for that, of course, is probably the main thing to be thinking about and how that's all gonna work. So that'd be my curiosity, I guess, of how funding's gonna work and everything like that, so.
Did you find your answer? Or
I
question?
have questions but they're in the finance committee meeting minutes
Okay.
for this month,
think-
so I don't know if,
Yeah, we'll wait until that.
Yeah,
I
wants
guess
to.
I'll go over the two questions from last time. So the building company always is included in the audit, is that correct?
Yep.
And then when we looked at, there was like the original budget, and then the final budget, there was a big difference in administration costs. So we were wondering if there's a reason for that.
Offhand, I'm not sure what that would be, I think that'd probably, your budget, you guys work with like Bergen Creative
Mhm.
Planning, work putting your budget together?
Yeah.
I would think they would have specifics on that. I don't offhand, but.
So yeah, I think we talked to Bergen about creative planning about that, and
Okay.
they'll look into it in the next month.
Yeah.
that was, it was like, wait a minute, how is it that it says this amount here and then it was
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars
Are there
less
any other
on this other
questions?
page?
I'm sure they have specific notes on when you put together your budget, why X amount was here and why it would have been decreased. I'm sure they'd have something on that.
Any further questions? I think we're ready to move on to the November finance report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
All right, so we did not have a finance meeting in December, so we'll be looking at both November's financial reports and December's financial reports. Those 2 months' financial reports look really similar. I think just going over some highlights from them, so just looking at the December financial report, we have the ADM of 600 is our actual ADM right now, and so that is different than when we looked at like our October meeting when it was down to around 570. And so the main reason for that is the PSCO numbers with the contract with Century have been added to our ADM now, so that accounts for the big jump in for that. But then now if we look at our contracted services expenditures, our expenditures and contracted services are up quite a bit, and that again, the reason for that is the PSCO contracting. So that's one big update. As far as where we stand for the year, the adopted surplus for the year was 50,000. Our working budget surplus for the year is 48,500. So similar numbers there. With the December financial report, we get to 50% through the fiscal year, and revenues are at 51% of the working budget. Expenditures are a little lower than that, at 44.4% of the working budget right now. One other, I think, just note from the meeting that we should all be aware about is with new state legislation, there's earned sick and safe time. new rules, and so the full-time employees, kind of what our policies cover everything that would be required from the legislation, but for part-time employees, that can be a bit of a change, and so we have to figure out what that impact will be. It can be something that will be tough to predict due to the nature of part-time employees, but that's kind of something we should kind of think about, so it's not just a surprise at the end of the year for that. I think we've covered a lot of the other expansion and donation topics from this. So what questions or other things should we talk about from the financials from the last 2 months?
I think at our last meeting, we talked about the new requirements, or not requirements, but aid from like the library services. Do you want to touch upon that real quick?
Yeah, so that was part of when we had our financial update sometime in October, early November. We had to have updates for that. The student support personnel aid would need to be a new position that was hired during the pandemic period. So the plan we have is Dr. Hinton and creative planning and Reeves will just take a look at exactly what position that would be. And that funding we have to use at the end of the year or we lose it. So we have to make sure we spend that in, or we have a way to spend that, or if we don't, could we add something as a way to spend that? The school library aid can be used for school library aid, or if we do not use those funds, the information we have is they will be added to our fund balance at the end of the year. And those were both $20,000 in automatic state aid.
Mhm.
So is there a plan with administration to look at the school library aid, or are we planning on leaving that money?
We get that money regardless, so if we don't spend it, they just deposit in our bank account. I don't really, that was the impression I got from Dustin when he was explaining that. The student support aid, we're gonna have to figure out if there's something we can code what we're already spending to that. Or we'd have to hire another position, but it's only $20,000, so it's gonna be really hard to hire anybody for $20,000.
But it could be used to, like, if somebody was hired at 0.75, it could be used to expand them to maybe full-time, is what I got from that too.
Yes. So we're just kind of looking,
It's so new that we're,
yes, and we do have, began since the pandemic of contracting our school psychologists differently. So, but that's, some of that is, most of her time is coded to special ed, so that's a little bit different.
Well,
So there's some confusing things in that.
I guess my question is, there's a plan, you're looking at the student support personnel aid, and how to use that money. Is there a plan to use the school library aid for a school library, or is the plan to just let it sit and then use the money for whatever?
So right now, there's some real specifics in terms of what you can spend the library aid for. And we can't, well, what I was hoping initially was, well, could we just spend it to buy some more books for, I mean, our English teachers can always use more books. We can always use more books here. They can't be classroom libraries, is basically what they were saying, which is kind of weird because, so we'd have to look at, with that added money in our budget, is there a way that we could not use that money and let that money roll over and still buy some more books? I don't know. I don't know if that's playing too many games. So we would have to still continue to work with our accountant on that. He's still trying to figure out what it is exactly, why they would do it that way. Earmark that money really specifically and then say, but if you don't spend it, you can just roll it into your bank account and use it however you want it
Yeah.
next year.
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but were a lot of things in the legislation that were a little weird this year, so I don't know. But, getting more books in the hands of kids is always good.
So you mentioned that there's a potential for a fundraising event in the spring. Is that a potential need or a potential opportunity? Because they're different. Like, do we need to do this?
So
Or is this this could help us with X, Y, and Z, but there's not a need to do it?
Well, the budget is the budget. I mean, more money is always useful. I mean, we are not in a position to say no to money. The AFC, Alternate Funding Committee, wants to do a fundraiser in the spring. We haven't quite figured out how, who, where that would work out. You know, there was talk about maybe doing a fun run, but we don't really know who's gonna organize it exactly, who's gonna do the running. It's not gonna be me, unless someone's gonna chase me. So how would that work? How would we actually make money off of that kind of thing? So there's a potential for it. We're kind of hoping somebody like can encourage somebody to take ownership of it and kind of get it going. So there's a hope. I don't know if it's gonna happen or not.
I think in the past, in the spring, if you go back before COVID, they were
Dragon
dinner or the
They wanted to do
NHS
a
Carnival.
Carnival, yeah.
Was planned for COVID year. So I think the goal is still to have some kind of spring replacement of the Dragon dinner. It just hasn't happened yet.
One thing that we would love to do is for next year as our 25th year anniversary, is perhaps plan something even bigger going out for, at that point. Because that is a special year for us. 25 years in the charter school world is something we should celebrate.
So if you have any ideas, submit them to the AFC.
Yeah,
I mean,
or any extra time, if anybody's got extra time.
Ideas, yes, time, no.
Yeah, so
So
that's part of the
AFC is
thing.
Justin and yourself, correct?
There's some other people. on
And
the
some, yeah,
committee
but
too.
as far as
There's-
contacts.
Sarah's in it, yeah, but you can reach out to me if you have some ideas or any,
Mhm.
anybody who's interested in doing any kind of planning and collecting of donations and that kind of thing. So we're always, you know, so when you ask, is there a need? There's always need.
I know, yeah.
I don't know, I mean, we're okay in our budget without it? Would it be nice to have more money? Yes.
And then, thank you for addressing the 2022-23 give to the max that's in the notes. My question is twofold. One, is this gonna be communicated out to the general school community that doesn't know to go look in the finance committee report to find out what happened with the bands? Because it's been asked of me no less than 5 times, and if it's asked of me no less than 5 times, I'm guessing it's been asked of others, you know, kind of that mouse thing. And while I understand what happened, my question is, whose responsibility is it so that we as a board make sure it doesn't happen that way again? That they don't get, that there's, you know, that they're not able to be rolled over if they're not used for whatever reason, whether the vans weren't in production or we were looking at how we could use them legally because the initial purpose was different from what we could do. But my other question to you is, when we look at our 501c3 status, and these were funds that were given through not Dollars for Doers, which is different than Give to the Max, but through a national program. Give to the Max is a national program. We put out what we were gonna use those funds for. People across the nation could have, and I know in some cases did, donate to us and to these vans. I wanna make sure we're not in trouble, so to speak, by not using those for the intent that those gifts were given. Because I know that nonprofits can get in trouble for doing that, and I don't wanna see us get in trouble. So that's my, while I'm glad it's here, questions are about it.
And that was my question too, that was a note I had, was is there any contractual or legal concerns using, having this unused money go into the general fund reserves?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the accountants know of it. They would be the ones that would tell us. I don't even think legally we were probably ever really able to buy the vans, which was a mistake from the beginning because we have to buy such a small van to be allowed to use it. We can buy a small school bus, I think it was a troubled idea from the beginning. I mean, it was a good idea, but it was gonna be a difficult idea to ever implement. The auditor does not, the accountants, they really hate it when we hold funds over year to year, because then attaching them to the original purpose is very difficult. I don't know if we're gonna be able to buy the vans even if we pulled the money back out and we had them, I don't know. But I get that we shouldn't have
If
been.
we cannot buy the vans, can we use it for the intent, which was transportation, whether that's
Busing.
transportation for extracurriculars, transportation for field trips, transportation, my understanding is graduation may not be here, transportation for our band to be able to go wherever those things are. It's still transportation, and that's what they were given for. So if we can't use it for if the make and model of what the intent is no longer available, is it possible that we can use it to uphold the idea behind the intent? Does that make sense?
Yes, we could use the money. The problem right now is because it was never earmarked properly with the accountant at the end of the year. It rolled into our reserves. Now, the only way to get it out of the reserves is it has to run through our budget, which then will put our budget, even though we're pulling more money in and spending it, it makes our budget go negative. And relatively significantly, which can then throw a lot of other stuff out of whack. So at this point, because it wasn't done, it's not advisable to do it, because then we start making everything look wonky, you know, with our finances.
I just wanna make
I think
sure we
it's a-
don't get in
I
trouble
think
with
it's a really good
501c3.
point.
Yes.
And I think you should follow through with the finance committee, and maybe we can get creative planning to look into that answer. So I think, Isaac, if you could touch base with
Continue.
creative planning on the 503B status, sorry, I said it wrong.
501c3.
501c, yep. Question that Mary had, I think we'd be better off there.
They will know nonprofit allocation guidelines. I don't know them, but they will know them.
So, good? All right.
But that's what you can ask them, is allocation guidelines.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Kate, can you, Wendell, or you, Kate, whether it's through the board report that comes out after this, or through the school info, can we please put something out to the community, at least to the MSA parents? It won't reach everybody who
I think
give to the
with
maps.
the update from Kate as far as what was delineated within this year's Give to Max, if we put that out to the community, that's a good opportunity to maybe include just a general
Yeah,
statement.
so I can include that in the executive director
Update when you
Yeah.
share.
I can send a link, and then I can put in here, I don't wanna confuse people who aren't paying attention to it, but I can put, you know, essentially this document, I can put a note
Yep.
on that.
I think that would be fantastic,
Mhm.
some sort of communication so that people know that.
Yep.
Don't expect a van.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's gonna pull the robotics truck trailer or something, I
Yes,
don't know.
and I mean, it's disappointing, because it would have
It was a
been
great idea.
amazing if we could have gotten
Yeah,
it, really.
Any other questions on the finance reports? If not, Isaac, do you want to do them one by one?
Yes, that makes the most sense to me. So I make a motion to approve the November financial reports.
Is there a second?
I can second, this is Dan.
Any further discussion on the November financial reports? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Passes unanimously. December?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the December financial reports.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Mary? I do want to give you, Isaac, a shout out. I think what you're doing with the finance committee is really great work, and you have taken this on. I know you were really nervous about it at first, but you're doing a really great job.
Thank you. So, yeah, there's good parents in the committee too,
Yes,
so it's
there's
good to have a bigger committee than
great
we've had in
committee.
the past.
Governance and Policy Committee, is there any questions for Heather? I know we have a couple of first reads coming up here. If you have caught anything in your first read, please forward them to Heddle, Jules, or Dr. Hinton, and we will address those in our Governance Committee on the 30th. But as far as the minutes of this one, any questions?
I have a question
Yep.
for this. Is it possible, and this is just me wanting consistency, sorry. Is it possible that we can get this kind of format with those on the committee, across both committees? I
Oh,
love
as
the
far as
way-
like absence.
I love the way Isaac does that. And I.
I think Shawnee does that. Yeah, because she takes them, but yes,
Whoever,
yes.
whoever does it,
Yep.
I love it. It
Yep.
makes it really easy to read and really easy to see
Okay.
and so forth.
So Dr. Hinton, yes. That's you.
And I like how the minutes, or how this is done as far as the agenda, but my question is, where are the minutes?
On the right side.
So where's the discussion for some of this?
So we've been trying to capture as much of it in the right column so that we could attach to what we've talked about. These policies, the 700s, were not very juicy to discuss. I mean, there wasn't a lot of it is very statutory, so we didn't have a lot that we could really change or do much about. We had a couple, like 709, we're holding because it's.
We were looking at, because we rely on 833 for transportation, we feel maybe we should just adopt their policy because that's.
So that would be nice to
Yeah.
know as to, like, here it just says recommend holding policy for further review. Well,
Rationale.
what's the rationale behind that? Why are we holding it? Who's reviewing it? That kind of a thing. This doesn't really tell
Well,
me.
and we just weren't ready to bring it forward yet, so it will come at some point, we're just not ready.
I like this style, I think as you were mentioning, it was easy for me to follow.
Mhm.
So, but that's a style thing, right? I mean, some people like words and I like charts.
Yeah, because that was kind of, we've gone through a bunch of different ways, and when I was just trying to take the notes, it started to feel like,
Yeah.
because sometimes we don't take these policies in order,
Sure.
in
Anyways,
the,
I thought it was easy to follow.
so. Yeah, and it's kind of makes it a little easier for us, and for me especially, it's just kind of track where we are with which policies. Because we had a very aggressive agenda, which we knew we weren't gonna get to, so the 600 we held, and those will be coming. Most of those will be talked about, I believe, in Jules, in January, the next meeting, 2 weeks.
Next week.
Next-
Oh, isn't it?
It's next-
30th.
2 weeks, next week is the student open house, I'm like, wow, this
Yeah.
month is going fast, I'm a little hard to tip here.
Maybe to build on what Mary is saying is if like, let's take whatever policy X, if we wanna change it somehow, maybe just capture that in action. You know, the board recommends changing this paragraph based
Right.
on this discussion. Cause then that would flag to me, cause when I look through a lot of them are just change math and science academy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's pretty easy. But if we wanna change it, it's like, why? Then I'd look back to these notes and say, what was the governance committee thought process there, right?
I mean, and another, thinking openly about this, I think too, I mean, we're all welcome to participate in these meetings. We don't have to not go to them. We can all participate in them. I think maybe sending the agenda for example, the next meeting, the 30th, to the board. So if there is a policy scheduled that you might be a little more passionate about and want to speak to it, maybe you can plan to attend that meeting. Would that help?
Just a quick, can we, Didn't we change that? We used to have it the way you described it.
We just can't have a majority there because we can't make decisions.
And I think that's only for the 2 board committees.
I thought we went so far as approving people who could attend, no?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's
They
a change
approve
from when.
Parents.
But I
So-
think
No, it
if
was
it's a
approved
policy
of
that
who
you're
could attend.
wanting to really dive into, I think it'd be best if you're.
I agree with you, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I thought we changed it, because in the past, people could come or could go,
Mhm.
and now we have a list, here's the 10 people that can come. 11th can't.
And I don't think that that person can necessarily sit there and participate fully. Like, for example, if Brian wanted to come because he's particularly interested in, I don't know, just say, 5:15. He would just sit as an audience member,
Yeah.
right, as a visitor, kind of? Is that what you're saying? And as long as we don't hit quorum.
That's how I
Yeah.
understood it, like when we did our notes here, it's like community members, so if someone just visits who's not a regular member, we've had that a couple times last year.
Yeah,
They
'cause
can still be
in-
present, but more
maybe
to
in that-
listen in.
Maybe in that instance too, sorry to talk over, submit your questions prior to, and then if you're just wanting to be there to monitor and make sure that you can hear the conversation to your questions, that's always an option, but I just recommend submitting what you can, especially following a first read on the items.
I don't think I've updated the policy review plan to note what we're doing in the next meeting yet. Just been a little bit behind on some of
600
that.
series.
But it's a 600 series, so they're listed here in the review next meeting. That is essentially the agenda for the next. We're not gonna have an update on 709 by then, which is a student transportation policy. And we'll probably take 806, crisis management, off the agenda entirely. We just left it on there as a note because we're trying to do a full safety review before we update that policy as an admin team. So,
Any other
And
questions?
then I guess I would also ask, it does not show on here when the meeting started or ended, nor does it have the next date. So just, it would be nice to have that information on the minutes.
Okay. Further questions? All right. Since our student reps aren't here today, I've asked a couple of board members to read what they've submitted. Brian, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So this is from Joseph.
Yep.
And I will do a little bit of abbreviation names just to protect. This month, I want to highlight a new club and activity that is an opportunity for MSA students to explore. The club that I wanted to highlight is MSA's new business club, brought to you by the president, Sophomore Bria P., and advised by their parent. This club actively teaches students business and brings new opportunities for MSA students to explore. They meet every other Wednesday from 8 to 9 a.m. in room 2A. Below is the interview I conducted with Bria. So Joseph was asking, why did you start the business club at MSA? And the response was, so I started the club at the school since MSA really didn't have anything for classes or clubs revolving around business. I'm interested in business, and in the past, I took an online business class last summer, which I really enjoyed. I wanted to give students at MSA the chance to explore things. I talked to people with many different grades, and they seemed intrigued by the idea of a business club at MSA. His follow-up question is, what are your short-term and long-term goals for this club? And the response was, I hope to accomplish a big club with hopefully 30+ members, and we are on track with the goal and probably being able to exceed it too. This year is about building a strong base for the students and getting as many people as possible to join. And in my meetings with Mr. Heyman, he brought up the potential of having the club manage a school store and have students learn from that.
This is from Josh about athletics. So MSA swimming, last month MSA began their swim team co-op with Cretan Durham Hall. After adding 3 MSA students to the team, the boys swimmers have seen a lot of success in their inaugural season. Ryan C., Gabe K., and Joseph A. have encountered great success in their past meets. Despite falling to Stillwater, the future of the MSA swim program is bright and bound to have considerable success. The MSA Nordic, even though this winter has brought very little snow, the MSA Nordic team has been doing well. The meets have begun to pick up to how they have been in the past. The team competed in a weekend race, the 6th and 7th of January, with about 800 people in each race. In this past weekend's ABC relays, the Dragons could power through despite the frigid temperatures. Parents supply hand warmers, capes, and heaters to keep our team warm. The MSA girls basketball team, coming off their conference championship last year, the girls basketball team has returned looking to defend their title. They currently hold a 6-5 record to start the season and hold a 5-2 record in conference play, landing them a third place spot. The race to the top of the conference has been close and is going to be interesting to see how the final standings pan out. Their next game is tonight at 6:30 at St. Paul Academy. Go Dragons. And then finally, the MSA boys basketball team currently holds a 7-8 record this season. They have found recent success, winning 5 out of their last 7 games this season. They are currently 3-1 in conference place, sitting at third place after picking up a notable win in overtime against Twin Cities Academy, following the buzzer beater shot by Noah G. to send it into overtime. It is going to be interesting to see how the end of the season plays out for the team. Go Dragons.
For anybody that might have missed that game, that was quite the nail biter and blew up on Instagram, so.
And they both had meets or events tonight for sports, so that's why they aren't here today. So we wish them luck in the entire school. All right. Consent agenda. Is there an motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Again, submit your edits to the committee as we move forward. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Mary, can you reaffirm which?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the motion?
Yep. So the motion is to approve the consent agenda with the reminder to submit comments on the first reads to the governance committee.
Yes, I should have made a motion to pull something, but that's fine.
If it's a first read, make sure to submit it through
Pardon?
governance committee.
I'm looking for clarification on something, so.
Yep. And if it is about the second read too, and you send it to the governance committee, we can evaluate whether it needs a third read as well from there.
Okay.
So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Do we need a 5-minute break? Or are we good to get through the rest? 5? Okay, motion to 5-minute break.
Second it.
Heddle?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll second.
so we will reconvene at 7:55.
Then you don't look like a business traveler, right?
Yes, I am driving.
All right, Caitlin, are we back? Good. All right, welcome back. 7:55, we are on to the discussion and decision part of our meeting. First up is our line of credit renewal. Isaac, do you want to speak to that?
Yep, I'll start with it and then Dr. Henning can add in as needed. So we have, this is something that MSA has had in the past, in case something happens with state holdbacks would be the main reason. We do not anticipate needing it, and in the past, MSA has not used it, but it's always recommended that schools would have a line of credit in case something unplanned happens. The board of directors would need to designate the treasurer and the executive director, so we'd both have to agree to take out the line of credit, so not just one person can do it. And historically, we've taken the highest amount of credit that we are offered in this time.
That sounds right. I don't know, they didn't give us any paperwork to sign. They just wanted from the BOD that we approve continuing our line of credit. Typically, this is done in December, but we got notice after
The meeting, yeah.
the meeting, so we didn't feel the need to call a special session since it was unlikely we would use that money. But we need to renew it if we want to have it.
So Isaac, do you want to call the motion?
Yep, I'd like to make a motion to renew our line of credit.
Is there a second?
I'll second that one.
Discussion?
Is there a limit?
Yes,
that we have?
it's typically schools are offered between 200 and 500,000.
And I know, this is going back a long time, like early John, we have had to use it a little bit in the summer, and I think it was in 2013 or 2015 when the state did pull back money, and it just protected us.
During
Yeah,
the
and that's
recession.
what Dustin recommended we have it, even though we don't expect to use it, in case something were to happen that's out of our control and like that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. I'll let Sarah catch up.
Just spelling errors.
Yep. All right, a decision on 702.1. For fundraising, the governance committee has recommended that this be repealed. Heddle or Jules or Dr. Hinton, do you want to speak on that a bit further?
Yeah, so motion to, recommendation for the repeal was because of the administrative nature of this policy. This is an MSA created policy as well, so this is not one that was model policy or management. This is just a MSA created administrative in nature. It should remain administrative in nature. That's why we're asking for the repeal.
Would you like to propose the motion so we get into discussion?
I'd like to propose a motion to repeal policy 702.1, which is regarding fundraising.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
So while I understand what you're saying, that it's an MSA created policy, one thing that became evident, and I have not gone through the differences between the two, I'm in the process of it, which is why I wasn't ready to go to do as you had asked Wendell tonight.
And I
But-
actually forgot about that, so I'll add that to our next agenda.
While it may not be a MSBA mandatory policy, and it's not listed in their charter policies, it is the MAX, which is the charter school organization that we belong to. It is listed as one of their essential policies. And it was interesting because they actually talked about a fundraising policy at the MSBA workshop that I attended last week, and mentioned that while not required, and they said it wasn't required, so I'm confused as far as how they come up with their required and Max comes up with their essentials, because they seem to differ. But that being said, they said it was important for schools to have a policy such as this, so you don't have every single every single group in the school going out to businesses left or, one week after another, and knocking on doors and having your school become a nuisance to the community. So, while I get that, and I get that it's an MSA created policy, and it's not an MSBA required policy, and it is administrative in nature. I also know that when you look at the max essential policies, it is listed there.
Did they provide an example? I'm curious.
They don't provide an example. Now, they don't on their website. It doesn't mean that if you go to them, they don't have one that you could ask for. I haven't asked for that yet.
Jules, I think, look like you were going to say something.
I guess I pulled up regarding, it's not one of the mandatory policies with MSBA. It's
Right.
not. And the worry when we put things that are not mandatory in place, if there's some kind of adjustment, we don't get that information, then there's been an adjustment, we can be out of compliance, right? It's easier, sometimes leave these things to administration, who can make an adjustment on the fly if needed. We're not always, and again, this is administrative. If we have this as one of the policies, we could be running into an issue where we're overstepping our governance-based bounds. So I worry about that a little bit.
I get that. However, I think on your first reads tonight, there's a policy that was not required by MSBA in their required policies that we did have. And I believe as a board, we voted to repeal it. Now, I wasn't fully trained, and I'm still not saying I'm fully trained, but it is a policy, it's the health insurance policy that we have to. And that is a requirement, that's a statutory requirement for charter schools. And it was listed on the MAX list of essential policies that we repealed, and now it's back in front of us. And MSBA is going, oh, we need to make a model policy of this. So
And they're
while I
working.
understand what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, Jules, I also don't know which body we're supposed to be following, because MSBA has shown that they missed a required policy for charter schools.
So is there any other input at this time?
I guess, do we have a procedure, or do we need a procedure?
So so this policy requires that the administration approve all fundraising activities and make sure that they aren't overlapping and becoming an annoyance or a nuisance to the community.
If we repeal this, then.
But we would still be doing that.
Okay.
I mean, because this policy requires, but we would still be doing that. And actually, Mr. Heyman organizes for the restaurant nights. Because
So
we
if a
start working.
student tried to do something, administration would step in and.
Right, I mean, you still have to have it approved by administration to run a fundraiser that has anything to do with MSA. And so we've put that with one administrator so that I'm not approving and that somebody else is. And so we've got a list of what's going on so that we're not overdoing it. That's what this policy has asked us to do, and we expect to continue to do that. I mean, that would make sense that we would continue that.
I don't know, but this is 20 years old. I'm gonna
Yeah.
guess 20 years ago, there was a problem. And they
Mhm.
said, the board jumped in and said, you guys don't know how to do it, we'll help you by creating a policy. And so I think I feel it is a bit of overreach from the board to step down and tell administration how to manage fundraising.
Brian, your point?
I think, yeah, same thing. I mean, number one is, I always worry about legal. Like, if we can't enforce it, then now we have some mud on our face. Number two is what prevents it. My understanding is MSBA is our number one go-to. And then the MAX, that's the first time, I don't know much about them, so I have to do some research.
Minnesota Association of Charter Schools.
Okay,
They
so-
specifically deal solely and only with charter
Okay.
schools.
And so it's that, but as long, my biggest concern would have been, is if we have nothing in place and then kids just start selling bubble gum just to make,
Yeah.
and there's that. So I think Dan wrapped it up pretty well, so thank you. And Mary, thanks for educating me. Thank you.
Karina, Isaac, or Sarah, do you have any? I think there's great discussion going on right now. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
everybody's heard.
I mean, I see both sides of both wanting to make sure that we have something in place, but also overreaching
Mhm.
into governance. And so I don't have much to add. It's just going between those two.
I don't have much to add. Yeah, when I heard it for the first time, definitely made sense just to repeal it and leave it to administration. I've got some new things to think about, but I
Yep.
think I'm still kind of thinking.
Yeah, I'd say similar, like, is there a harm if we keep the policy? That way we have something to back up? Like, I don't know.
My thought now with the discussion we just had is maybe we rescind the motion, send it back to governance, do our research through Max, and maybe find a way to rewrite the policy so it isn't so administrative led, just assurance of our oversight rather than overreaching. Thoughts on that?
It just concerns me that it's the age of it, it's
Mhm.
never been updated, and it has no statutory references. You know, it's not rooted in 124, it's not rooted in 317. I just don't, I don't, so that concerns me, but with the Max Essential policy, the other thing is, you know, I think it was back in October 2023, when several of us board members went to training, and MSBA had just rolled out their charter model series. And I think that if I recall, the motion on the table was for MSA to adopt the charter model policies. And so that is why we've steered so heavily on doing that task, is we adopt the charter model policies. Like, that's what the board looked at. It looked at the charter models and approved them and said, yes, board. That's my recollection. So do we want to change that charging order to also open it up? We're an advisory committee,
Mm-hmm.
so would the board like to open that up? Do we need a separate charge for that, or is my recollection mistaken?
So I have a question. Does MSBA has, and we've always used MSBA policies, we just are moving from the ISD ones, which were all we had initially, to the charter ones.
Which were modeled after MSBA's ISD policies. Our policies seem to be modeled after MSBA's ISD
Yeah,
policies.
the previous ones,
Yeah.
and then the current ones too. Does, when I've looked on Max to try and get, they don't have a roster of policies. They don't have a set of policies that we can go off of.
They haven't rolled out that model series that
They don't have a
we
model
can
series, so
replicate.
then,
So
that's the question.
I think it goes even back before October of '23, right? I mean, it goes back a couple of years where we were advised as a board to getting back towards governance and away from the management, right? So one way to do that was go through the policies where in the past we might have overreached a bit. And this is another example of that. And I'm not saying that we have to blindly follow that and get
Yeah.
rid of everything. We should question it as we are now.
Yep.
Do we need it or do we not? But I think going back to that initial crux, which was, all right, let's clean house a little bit and get back to governance and a little bit away from this, maybe micromanaging a little bit, because that could be human nature.
it's just such a workload.
It
I'm
is.
sorry, I
But
don't mean to mention the
yeah.
workload, but
But we've been doing good progress.
Yeah.
No doubt it's a lot of work, but I mean, we're in the 700s now. and
We only
we're-
have 600 to go.
So I
I mean,
think
that's a big one,
we
but
should
And I
be
think
proud
this-
of the work that has been done.
This policy may, as it is administrative, I don't think it's gonna hinder us whether we remove it now or wait another month. I think we do owe it to look
Mhm.
into,
send it back.
yeah,
Yeah, just send it back, and we can even ask MSBA.
Yep.
Hey, and maybe that's what we ought to do, and it's a governance conversation I'm having, but maybe we should
maybe it's another opportunity to work
ask
with that.
Dr. Morrow, hey, it's listed as an essential on Max.
it's not hurting us to have it. We're still doing what's in the policy right now, so it being in place is fine, in terms of daily operations.
Do we need to make a decision then?
I think we need to rescind the motion. Well, we didn't, well, yeah, we have to rescind the motion. So Jules, do you rescind your
Yeah,
motion?
I will rescind the motion to repeal policy 702.1 regarding fundraising.
Isaac, are you willing to rescind your second?
Yep, I rescind my second.
And then, is there a motion to, or do we need to motion, or do we just call for it to be?
I move that we table 702.1 until further research can be done
Through the
and
governance?
consultation through MSBA and MAX. And that doesn't put it on February, so if you don't get the answer by February, you can bring it to us. We're just tabling.
Thank you, Mary.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Great discussion, great teamwork, that was good. All right, let's move on. Discussion on the election procedure, reviewing our election policy. There is a proposed policy from the governance committee. And then after that, we're going to move for to form the election committee. So, governance committee, do you want to speak to the election policy? Where we're at there?
No, I put a note on there. Just tried to, really succinctly get 3 eligibility number 1 rephrased. Do you guys see that? I did it as a note. You
Yeah,
can
see
see
it.
it, okay,
Yep.
great, great, okay, that's all. Just wondering if anybody has thoughts on that. Language, phrasing.
I wonder, so with point 1, I'm just asking to clarify here. For point 1, that is so that a current senior's parent, because the term would start in July, a current senior parent could not run for the community member position. Is that correct?
Correct. You have to
Okay.
pick the right category so that you
And-
can hold that seat.
Right, so they couldn't run for the parent and they couldn't run for community, obviously. They're not a teacher, they couldn't run for the
Could
teacher.
they run for community?
Well, the
Well,
way
we-
it's
At the
reading
time of
right now
election.
is
Yeah,
they have to qualify at the time of the election.
because I think the conversation in the governance committee was around, I mean, and we love our appointed members, but we're 2/3 appointed members right now, which is a lot. And it, that we wanted people to be able to serve the whole term when they were elected or expected to be able to serve the whole term. So like if you had currently if you have a student in 11th grade and you're gonna run for the board for a parent seat, well, that's the only seat you could run for. Then we'd have to do an appointment after 1 year.
Right.
It would be required. The reason why we thought about at the time of the election was, and really a part of it was just I clean up all of the eligibility beforehand, because we did have an election recently where we had somebody that ran, did not win, but if they had won, they couldn't have been seated because they wouldn't have passed the background check. To try to, or if a person has a student who's in the 12th grade and is expected to graduate, what happens if they don't? Now we've got a kind of a public issue where we've had somebody who won, but now they can't be seated because their kid has to go to summer school. And so they're still a student because they haven't graduated yet. So just to kind of clean up all of the messiness that could potentially happen, that you would be eligible and cleared. And part of it too is we've held off on onboarding, waiting background check and all kinds of other things. When the person won, as soon as they were certified, not that they would take the seat, because we have to decide when that would happen.
But if
that
there
they
were
would-
an opening and the person won, they could, they could,
They can't start the seat before the term. So like if it was a seat that was not currently being held, now somebody could appoint them for that last
Right.
meeting, but that's a different thing. But the thought on the, by the committee was, let's try to make sure that anybody that gets elected can from our point, we wouldn't have any reason to prevent them from taking the seat because of eligibility.
I like that. Just a typo can
Mhm.
capitalize
Yes.
Q on number 1.
What if we just had the last part qualify for the entirety of their elected term? Would that help?
And what would be your idea for the situation we had where where the parent wouldn't have, you said pass a background check?
But we have that as number 2.
Oh, you're just talking about for number one.
Number 1, oh yeah,
Number
I'm
one,
sorry.
okay, not
Just
feeling-
number 1, if we shorten number 1, so we took out that, the first part and just said, the expectation is you'll qualify for the entirety of the. And the expectation is maybe too weak of a word because it says candidates must. So if you
Mhm.
said candidates must and then started it with qualify for the entirety of their elected term.
So I see what you're saying, and I like that from the one hat I'm wearing, because I'm thinking community member is a hard position to fill, but we may have a parent of a senior graduating that would be interested in a community member. It's gonna be a point, it would take seat in July. Their kid is potentially graduated by then, hopefully. But the other side of that coin, and this is where I'm struggling with, is we may get a 6th grade parent, an incoming, they've just gotten into the lottery, they're coming in next year, they're all excited, and they wanna run for the board, and they have no experience with the school. And then they might decide not to stay, or not to show up on the first 5 days. And now we've allowed somebody to run. Do you see how I'm saying?
And then you.
So while I like what you're saying with where you're going to that, to just that,
I guess, yeah,
they expected to qualify the entirety of their elected term or to serve for the entirety of their elected term. I struggle because if we take out that at the time of election, we might be stuck. Not stuck, but we may put ourselves in a,
We can't control the future though, I think.
No.
I think what we're trying to say is, at least you qualify. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Do you qualify? Because if you know you're only gonna be here for a year out of the 3-year terms, maybe we would strongly encourage you not to run. The way this is written is you wouldn't qualify anyways. You must be, able to be here for the 3 years. Now, if you move or choose to quit from the board or whatever, all of those things happen. And then we have an appointing procedure. I'm just saying, it's probably a good idea to say, can you actually fill out these 3 years before we even put your name in there?
Yeah, and it also, if you had a teacher or a school employee that says, I'm gonna quit at the
You
end of
can't
the
control
school
it.
year, but I wanna run as a community member, cause I'm out of here, I'm done, I quit. Does that mean we have to fire you if you don't quit, or you don't take the seat, or, that they're actually qualified, they've already separated from the school? Because also, if we think about the intent of the community seat, is to try and bring in not somebody who was, and it's not about our parents, is that, or, somebody who was an employee or a parent yesterday, and today they're not. So we're kind of missing the intent of getting in that community feedback from some, a little bit more, somebody who isn't quite as tied into the school.
I guess you brought up the point, Mary, of the example of where you are, I'm a parent now, but let's say my son's a senior and graduates, then I'll be a community. So then I miss out on both, right? Because I can't qualify for the 3 years as a parent.
Because your daughter's a sophomore.
Well, no, I'm just saying, even
Right.
if I just had a senior
Hypothetically.
as an example, but then I can't qualify as a community member because I won't be at the time of the election. So in my mind, take that part out, just leave us, do you qualify for the period of this term?
You would have to transition, wait till the next year.
The way it's written now.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
almost a built-in transition period, right?
Is that what we
Between
want?
the,
Can we get the thoughts of others?
My,
Right.
my main thought is if I have a junior and I really wanna be here, that's 2, and then now you're
You
screwed
can't do
to step down. Community member, I'll be honest with you guys, I think coming in with no relationship to this school has been beneficial from a different lens. And so, Mary, to your point, I actually am scared about a parent that's here for, like a year, and then now we're just gonna do status quo, because that's what we've done. And I think the idea of a new voice or someone from the outside looking in sometimes brings in new perspective, and from that. But I also, like we said, if we say you have to qualify the entire term, again, just the sophomore parents are the last ones that can really sit on this board. And that's kind of scary too, because we have some very, very good parents that could fill any of the seats. So I'm cautious, but I'm also like, to that point too. I mean, I think the more we can get from away, 1 or 2 people from away from the school, or whether it be, however, community member, would be beneficial.
so our goal is to maintain that 3-seat stability, 3-year term stability. We feel that that is priority, right? So then we just work backwards and make sure that our election policy really helps solidify that. And are the exclusions justifiable to the goal?
Any other thoughts? A lot to think about.
One of the things
It
too,
is, it's a lot.
to add on too, would be instead of the entire, the majority of your term. Because that way we could get a junior, their parents could sit 2 years and still finish out theirs 1 more term. To get-
Say that again, Brian?
Like if we would do the majority of your term, be able to fulfill the majority of your term.
So qualify at time of election and expected to qualify for
For
the majority of the term.
term versus
Our
the
bylaws
entirety.
are, I don't know, we have to
Yeah.
go look at our bylaws.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would like, Karina, I mean, you're filling a 1-year position.
Yeah.
I mean, how effective, how efficient do you feel your role is from that perspective?
I was saying this to someone the other day that, I enjoy the workshops, but I feel like I shouldn't be there. Like in the sense that the person who is going to fill my shoe or fill my seat, it should be there, right? Because I'm not gonna be here to see those long-term changes, to be part of those long-term changes.
Could be if you run again.
It could be. But as a 1-year seat right now,
Mm.
I won't be there. So I do see the benefit of focusing on the 3-year and understanding that things change, but the whole point is that they're elected for a 3-year term, right? They're not elected for a 2-year term. They're not elected for a 1-year term.
That being the case, can I toss it to you, Brian? You're a 1-year community member. How do you feel?
Well, it's again, you just hope you lay good roots right now, because you don't know what's gonna happen in a year, you know? And so, I mean, it is hard, that's where your pride comes in. Why are you doing this? For what purpose? And at some point, hopefully to walk away with your head high and knowing you did the right thing, so.
And I would like to remind us too, like, we don't get to decide who sits at the table.
No.
The community does. So as much as I agree, we need to at least have some basic requirements. I think maybe we have to look at the wording choice. It is recommended that candidates meet these expectations. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I mean, I'm not the English teacher. It is suggested, it is, I'm just saying.
I agree with the must for 2 and 3. I do agree with that. Must they? I mean, if I'm a 3M employee and I know that my department every so many years, you transfer out, and there are a lot of 3M families here, and I'm on that bubble or on that cusp of potentially transferring out, does that preclude me? Because I know chances are pretty good I won't be able to fill out my term. And we don't wanna exclude those people. So,
why would we not, I'm just asking, why would we not wanna exclude them for somebody that could sit for 3 years? A parent
none of us
who
are
could-
guaranteed tomorrow.
Sure, yeah, life is definitely fickle, but
And if 3M decides to leave me there for 3 years and I've not taken that spot on the board, I didn't run because there was that chance that in 2 years down the road, I'm gonna get transferred.
well, that's reasonableness too. I think, if we phrase it like reasonably expect. And I think the difference is, you, like somebody getting fired or having a situation loss that makes you move or something like that. That's not your conscious decision at that time. Like you're just, you don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. So I think that's where the innocence comes in and the good intention. If we're saying that our priority, I just pulled up our bylaws, board of directors seat terms shall be for 3 years. And if we are saying that we want a person to hold a 3-year seat term for 3 years, then what do we need to write in our election policy to facilitate that?
So the general consensus that I feel so far is a strong for 2 and 3. Just we're kind of hung up on 1.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question about 3.
Complete nomination paperwork and candidate statement.
In a timely manner? Or-
Well, by the
time of
deadline,
election, yeah.
or by the time.
Get on the ballot.
Hmm.
Meet the deadlines. What do you do with those late incomers?
Well, there's like a cutoff date usually.
And that's
there's
part of the election committee is they're setting a timeline, a date that you have to have that submitted in. If you're,
Okay.
I mean, there might have to be some exceptions because we've already talked about it with a community member. Maybe a community member comes in, we have no community members at the time of that deadline, but 2 days later, we might have to take consideration to that. I'm throwing that scenario out there.
And then the board would probably have to, or the election committee would have to make a decision at that point, however we decide to structure that.
So going back to topic number 1. What are we thinking? Because this is something that should probably go through tonight, seeing as we have to form the committee and get that ball rolling. So we have to kind of make a decision tonight. I do kind of agree more with Brian in the sense of the majority of your term, because I don't want to limit anybody from running. Consistency, yes, is key, but I don't want to deter people from running because, to some of the points on this side of the table, I might be moving in 2 years. I might be moving in a year. I mean,
So the devil's advocate to that though is, although this is for election, not for appointment, but let's say, when do we decide what's I guess we could just do mathematically, if you could serve 51% of the term, But if we're gonna put somebody on the board,
For a year and a half.
I think they should have a reasonably expect to be able to fulfill the term for which they're being seated.
Mhm.
I don't know that there's ever been anybody who's run not expecting.
I think we've had some
To
parents that
fulfill.
their kid graduated and they had to leave. I think that's happened
They
in
were
the past.
appointed. There was one that was appointed to fulfill.
Yeah, I don't know, I just,
And their kid graduated, and so they left a one-year term
Mhm.
left. But I think for the most part, we've had parents who have run with the expectation with the expectation that they were going to fulfill all 3 years.
so you don't think that there would be a problem with leaving this language in then? Because that's been, I mean, we're not gonna try and ask you for a statement from your employer as to whether or not you're gonna be fired in the next 3 years,
I like,
but.
to Brian's point, I like the majority of your term. I think people run with the intent of fulfilling all 3 years, but
And to the point, we hope too, Karina will run in the next election so that she is taking what she's learning and moving forward.
hey, if
Same
I
with any
didn't put
of
in
our
a
other
year,
members.
I was
Yeah,
looking at all of
And
them.
Brian, I mean, Hiddle as well. I mean, those are the seats that are up this time. We hope that you're taking what you're doing and hoping we can move forward. So,
Well, I mean, that 3 years, gives time for mentorship
mhm.
that the 1 and 2 year
Yeah.
appointees don't
Mhm.
get to provide, and I think that's a loss to really be able to provide that mentorship and experience down. My only problem with majority of your time is I feel like it undercuts the language of our bylaws, which says we want this seat to run for 3 years. And we are saying we want stability in that we have one person.
What if we go to the terms that are listed in our bylaws and we put in there, instead of all of this, they must. What about candidates must qualify for the seat at the time of the election and serve a 3-year term,
Yeah, so I think the
per our
thought,
bylaws, because then we're falling into that.
Hiddle?
so talk it through again, then it goes back to the example where a parent running isn't qualified for the seat because they had a criminal history.
We don't need to
report
get the
pulled on them.
details on that, I don't
Okay.
think.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was a failure to meet the background check.
Yeah, failure to meet the background check. And,
But if we leave 2 and 3 in there, and if we reword 1, that
Well-
says you must qualify for the seat at the time of the election
My-
and serve the term of 3 years as per our bylaws.
But those are, well, from what I'm hearing those as 2 separate things, which means it should be another number.
To qualify for a time of election,
Yep.
to
Yeah.
serve
Yeah,
For 3 years.
serve
the
a
3
3-year
years
term.
per our bylaws.
Yeah.
Because then we're not going in, then we're not in conflict with our bylaws, and then they know where we're getting this from.
And I think it holds the intent of what's written here, that you'll serve the 3-year term.
Sorry, number 2, this background check prior to running, are we now checking everyone before they run? Because I think we have had problems in the past where we did the election and then only later do the background check.
Yeah, that's, so we aren't right now, but we would.
In the future, we would, if there's 5 people, the school would pay for 5 background checks.
And they cost $8 each.
It's not a
so,
lot. I
I
don't
mean,
think it's
but
that
I mean, it's not that I wanna just waste money, but yeah, we would just do it ahead of time, so that
Well,
everyone in all their candidate paperwork would also submit to the background check.
I like having it clear so that if you what's the eligibility? So if I am concerned about passing the background check, I may not put my name in, right? Whereas if oh, fine, go ahead, check it, right?
Mhm.
So
So
what-
at least they know what the rule is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before they do it.
So what the election committee will have to establish is a deadline for applications, and there has to be at least a 2-week period maybe for that background check to pass, before the election is even hosted, or the ballot is approved, I should say. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would probably need 3 for the state background check. The big background
Right.
checks, the national ones are the
If I
national
recall,
and
I
state
think it
ones.
got a little dicey, like, because you can't just background check particular people, right? So you would have to background check everyone
Yeah.
or no one, right? And that
Right.
was, so.
Yeah, and so like teachers all have background checks, they're all
Correct, and I think
cleared.
volunteers here as well, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and
So,
I-
The big ones that would have to be is community members, because parents, if they're already actively in the community, they probably have already done a background check. There probably will be a handful of not, but
so you see with the little, you had passed a background check because you're volunteered here extensively
Yeah,
prior,
no,
so
I-
you already had it, so you didn't have to do it, and you wouldn't have had to do it
so
at the
getting
time
out of the
election.
weeds, let's go back to, do we need to split statement 1 into 2, qualify for the seat at the time of the election, and then make a second and move them down, be expected to fulfill the 3-year term per MSA bylaws, or
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it should
Yeah.
be 2.
Bring in the 2 pieces, that's fine. Makes it easier to read too.
Mhm.
I would say take the number 3 out of there, though, expected to fulfill the term as written, because you're 1-year terms. Am I right or wrong?
take number 3.
No,
Oh.
so you said qualify for the 3 years, but we have people elected for 1 term, right, or 1 year?
But you're not elected.
No,
This
you're
is
appointed.
Appointed, yeah.
God, you guys, wow.
How dare
I'll just go
That's
sit
okay,
outside.
we'll give you grace.
To Heddle's note point, maybe that needs to be included in the bylaws as part of appointed. That's another discussion for another day, but I see where you're coming on that, Heddle, but I think that's maybe more specific to the bylaws.
We should have an appointed procedure too, right? Not-
But that, yeah, but that doesn't go in
Yeah,
the.
doesn't go in the
Separate.
election.
Yeah.
That's not an election
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah,
don't
but
get
not
your- don't
this.
date.
But the
Yeah.
other thing is, if this is the cadence that we usually do, an appointed person comes before the board, and you can have that conversation that says, they're not, are we appointing somebody that can't do the term? And then, as opposed to, we don't have a debate over everybody who goes on the ballot, and we don't, and we shouldn't,
Right.
because that would,
So what I have is we wanna break it up into 4 numbers. Number 1 would be candidates must, 1, be eligible at the time of election. 4,
Qualify for the seat.
Be eligible at
Yes.
the time of election, yeah.
yes,
2,
okay. 2, the candidate must reasonably anticipate remaining qualified and eligible for the entirety of the 3-year term. Number 3, pass a
I
background
think our
check.
bylaws state that they must, that they serve a 3-year term. So I think it needs to be reflective of how our bylaws are stated.
Yeah, the way that was worded, it kind of sounded to me like appointed versus elected.
You wanna say you must serve a 3-year term? I don't think you can ask somebody that, tell them that they have to do it.
do we want to kind of take this idea and then take it, so this is the first read, take it back to governance, really do that, spend that time on wordsmithing that second bullet point, and then bring this back next time for
Fine.
the second
I'm
read?
gonna move that we.
I mean, I don't get to make a
I'm the queen of tabling
motion.
tonight.
I mean, but
We want to pass it as a first read, so that way it's
Right,
ready for the
second.
election.
but this is under decision and I don't believe that it was,
We can make a
Okay.
motion to pass as a first read.
okay,
But we'd still have a second read. It's
gotcha.
not-
The other thing I guess what I would ask is that the campaigning piece of it sounds like we discourage it, but you can still do it. I would like to change that to prohibits.
The only concern that we had, I remember when we were looking at this policy before, and the election policy, I think, has been rewritten darn near every year, is that we can't prohibit speech off of campus. We can discourage it, but we can't say that you can't run around your neighborhood, knock on every door and say, please vote for me, or you can't come on campus and do it. You can't, we don't want you to do it, but I don't know that we can control it or we have a mechanism to stop it. That's the only reason, because I wanted it to be just no campaigning, never mind, you did your thing. But we don't have any, people can put up on Facebook, vote for me, I'm the best, as long as they're not on our page.
Or
What
say-
if it's MSA prohibits using school resources or property in campaigning?
We can bring that to governance and reword some of
Okay,
that.
I'm just,
Yeah, I just want to be conscious of time.
yeah,
and,
no, that's fine.
But yeah, that was part of the conversation, and to your point earlier, maybe noting that in the minutes would have been effective, but we can take that back to governance and revisit that. I
So
will
then
say
can
too, I will say real quickly too, I like how this is set up. I think that more of the procedural stuff needs to come from the election committee itself. And if we start a historical record of the past that way, we have something to pass on to the next election committee. So that's where we're at with this policy. But Mary?
Can I ask that this go back to the committee, and can I ask that I'm just thinking with elections coming up and a spring break in 6 weeks, that we put this, and knowing that our board meeting is gonna be jam-packed on February 20th between lottery and all sorts of other stuff, can we have a small piece of the workshop meeting as a special meeting to revisit this and pass this
For a
policy
second read?
for a second read? Is that doable, Patel, for your governance committee? Is that doable, do you guys think? I mean,
I'm a little worried if we need to get any kind of legal opinion, we won't have it back in enough time. Also, one of the things that, on the elections, I think we were also kind of hoping to push the elections back a bit, because we start the election, last year we started it, I don't know, maybe like April 1st or something, and then it was done, and then it was certified in like April, and then it was, you know, Chris, and there was arguments over whether it's gonna be seated in June or July, but it's a long time between, and so we were thinking,
Heather,
that
can you
the,
shut the door, please? Thank you.
that the May board meeting would be when people would be certified, and then they'd either be sitting in June or July, whatever we decide. Here it says July organizational meeting. If that's something, I don't know if that's something we wanna do at that point, or we wanna seat them at the end of the June meeting. I don't know, I don't care.
And just a note to the community, we have somebody vacuum outside, so that's why we shut the door. We'll take it under consideration.
okay.
All right, so do you want a motion to approve policy 201 as a first read? Or
I move to approve 201,
point one?
point one with the discussion that we had, which I thought was really good, as a first read, and send it back to committee.
Is there a second?
Second, this is Dan.
Any further discussion? Isaac?
We can still form the election committee right now,
That's the
Yeah.
next item.
so we can still do that even
Yeah.
with this. Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Great discussion. All right, so call for election committee members. Do we have any volunteers? I know we're all pretty stretched thin with our schedules.
I can do
I think, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to be somebody who's not running for
Not
reelection.
running, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Sarah would be a good candidate.
Do we usually have people from each category, like a parent, a community member?
We have
and a-
2 or 3 people, I can't remember if we had a rule
I
around
can't
that, but
remember.
I think it would be
We
good
have
practice.
A
Yeah.
rule, but.
Yeah, I think it'd be good practice.
good practice. The other thing that Justin has done in the past to make sure that it's 100% fair is like, not any one individual gets access to all the data, right? So it's like, somebody gets how many people voted, somebody gets how they voted, somebody else gets that, and then Justin can compile. So he has a nice system to try to make sure it's as fair as possible without any one person being able to change.
Hasn't he traditionally been on the committee? I mean,
Justin
he's-
is also usually,
Yeah,
I think
we
he
haven't
almost has
asked
to
him.
be.
Yeah,
I think he has to be.
yeah.
Dan, you have a lot of knowledge on this. Would you be willing to?
I
know
can-
that's a big
I
question.
can especially, no, but I think if this one could be done remotely, I think we
I
can,
think
right?
we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So then I think it should be fine. I'm happy.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to, Mary. But actually,
I
you have
was-
more time left, or?
I have, yeah, this is just my first
First
year
year.
out of the 3.
Yeah.
So
I think Dan has more historical knowledge of how
you
things
have
are
more
done.
historical knowledge, but I don't
But
know
it's
how
good that you learn as
your,
well, right? Yeah. If you
and
want
that's
to,
why I wondered.
how about Mary is the lead and I can be backup parent one? Would that work?
Do we have any other
We can have.
volunteers?
We can have up to
Yeah.
4.
Up to
Yeah,
four,
we
yeah.
can 4.
People
Yeah.
on the committee.
So, I mean,
So,
of the
would
community
you be
members,
willing to
Jules is
be
the only other
historical?
option.
Yeah, I'd be the only one, because I know, yeah, you're just a year.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
up
just
for
a year.
election.
He's up for election.
Yeah,
So there'll be
it's
the.
just self wounds.
Yeah.
Three main, and I will
We're not
try
gonna
to join
make you
in.
ineligible.
Yeah.
You gotta-
Justin also has the historical
Yeah.
knowledge, right? So-
Yep. So,
Sure, sure.
yeah, so on the committee, so we had to make a motion to approve, how does this work again, Dan?
Approve the election committee, yeah.
Approve the election committee,
And then maybe I would just give him a task to run the election
Mhm.
and come back with the names for approval, something like that.
Do you want the procedure, the election procedure to come back? Because we will have an opportunity in February.
The 201.1?
No, well, there's those procedures listed there, but like a timeline, I guess that's
yeah,
what I'm
That
saying.
would be
because the
A
committee will have to
timeline in the
commit a
documents.
timeline.
Yes, yes, that'd be
things.
helpful.
The committee comes up with the timeline.
Correct.
Yes.
So, motion to approve election committee consisting of members Harms, Ellingson, Yap, Kinkle. With the directive to construct a timeline
Yeah, the election.
then
and
we'll
to
have
solicit candidates.
I don't think we can necessarily solicit candidates until after we get the,
Approval of the timeline and everything. Okay, so it's approval to construct an election timeline. Am I missing anything else?
Did you, I don't think you included Justin.
we need to include Justin too.
Okay.
Do you want me there or no?
I think it would be wise to
Traditionally.
have, yeah,
I'm not running.
so Kinkle, Hinton, and. Newman.
appreciated that.
We'll get the timing as well later. So right
Bless you.
now, so the main task of the election committee would to construct a timeline for the election.
Could it be a timeline and election plan? Like,
Or
is
election
it-
procedure.
We already used the word
An
procedure,
election
so
plan,
let's
sorry,
just say
election plan, yeah.
plan.
Timeline and election plan.
Election plan and timeline.
Excuse me. I'll read that again. Motion to approve election committee consisting of members Harm, Ellingson, Yap, Kinkle, and Gearing and Hinton as advisors with directive to construct an election plan and timeline. I will be the first on that, I guess. Is there a second? Here. further discussion? One of the things that the committee talked about too is completing nomination paperwork and statements. I think that instead of strictly just a candidate statement, I think there's a number of questions that I think we should really visit that would help give more in-depth of why this person is running. And I think Dr. Hinton has access to those questions and he can bring that to
Well,
the committee.
I've just found some samples
Yeah.
that other schools have used, just so that we can get a little bit more information, because I think sometimes people don't know what to write.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then they've got like one
Guided
sentence and it, maybe they're a phenomenal candidate, but they, you know, I like MSA. I mean, I've never seen anything that bad. but-
Well, and like running last year, it was just like people had very different ideas of what they needed to talk about.
Mhm.
And so it'd be like, oh, well, I could have talked about that, but I didn't know anyone was gonna say anything about that, so I didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, so it's just kind of some guided
Yeah,
questions. And then, I mean, candidate statement will always be there for people
Yeah.
to feel free whatever they want to write.
Mhm.
But I think just having a few guided questions would help
Yep.
dive deep into why somebody's running.
Good idea.
Any further discussion? Making sure. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Or sorry, against? Forgot that one. And then opposed. Karina, did you vote?
Abstain, sorry, I'm tired,
Sorry.
exhaustion's setting in.
Sorry, okay, let's do it. All in favor? Aye. Against? Abstain. And then we added an item to approve the enrollment option without lease for enrollment numbers. So,
Yeah, and I would like to empower the administration to be able to proceed with at least a base plan.
Yeah.
And then we can come back later and have a discussion, what does that change if we do leasing? But,
And can we just be clear, because I've got 2 years worth of enrollment, we're just
We've got
talking about the
24,
25. Because although we could say that those numbers, I just wanna make sure we didn't approve for
That's
2
right.
years in advance.
Just 24, 25. I would like to make a motion that we approve that one to be used at the lottery. And the motion would just basically be approving 24, 25. What do we call
Without
this?
lease
Without
property.
lease property.
Without lease
Enrollment
property
numbers.
enrollment options.
It's Item 3B in the executive director update.
3B, the middle column.
Okay.
So
Dan, you made a
Second.
motion?
I motion to approve, yeah.
I'll read what it says. Motion to approve 24-25 without lease property enrollment options.
Yeah, that's probably good enough.
Is there a second? Mary? Further discussion?
I wanted to, clarify that the reason for the increase in the 9th grade, as has been historical in order to grow the school, should not be because 10th and 12th graders who come into the school often have more issues or often are coming from more difficult situations. I think that it's important that we appreciate all students who come in, no matter what their situation is.
The intent is to keep cohorts
Yes.
together.
Yeah,
Yes,
not,
Yes,
Yeah.
not to
Not-
exclude
yeah.
other kids,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, and I'm sorry if I made it sound that way. We just wanna set kids up for the highest level of success.
Any further discussion?
So is this the only lottery we'll be doing no matter what? And then people will just be on the waiting list and we'll be able to accept a lot more on the waiting
So when we do
list?
the lottery, we put everybody in an order, and then we just accept the number of openings that we have at each grade level. If we, and hopefully, because we don't really notify them until after the board approves the lottery. If we were to be expanding, and we should know in February, then we would just add people who are the next ones in order.
Makes sense.
Further discussion?
Okay, so with the timeline, and I'll screw up the dates if I try to say them. I just wanna make sure we don't wanna do a conditional motion. So it would be something like, we approve the lottery without the lease unless at the time of the lottery, the lease premise has been secured.
Well, we
But
won't
we
be able to
don't
have the
have that
lease
because-
secured by then anyway, so there would have to be a separate
see.
motion
Okay.
at the February board meeting to change the lottery number.
Oh, so the February meeting will happen before
The lottery is not, it's just the drawing of the names.
Yeah.
The board approves the lottery in February, so if the board has already approved a leased property, then they would revise and change what they're gonna approve.
Okay.
So we're not, it's one motion today and then a different motion if something different happens in February.
I guess maybe it's a follow-up to yours. Will the parents be notified after the let's say we approve this one, will they be notified after the lottery, or will you wait until the board meeting?
We never can notify
have
them until
to
after the board
certify the
approves
lottery.
it.
Okay.
So
You
that
could
nobody,
almost
I
wait
mean,
anyways.
and this time we're doing it in the morning, and so I don't think we're gonna, sometimes we've, gathered up an audience. We
I've
won't.
been at the ones where the parents are there waiting, and if they are within the 92, they would kind of say, you're in, right? I mean, and that's, I think, useful for those parents to know
Right.
that they can plan on their child coming, because maybe they gotta move or whatever, right? So-
Yeah, so we're only asking them to hold off a week
Okay.
till they know.
Do we wanna just wait then? I'm okay either way. I think, the reason I was saying is that this would be the minimum that we would probably approve, and the next one would be more if we do the lease.
I think it's useful to go ahead and just say, so at least we have a minimum number, because people do ask, how many are you taking? We at least can say,
This
we're
is the
taking
board
at least
approved
this
number.
many, but we are hopeful we'll have more spaces.
I guess for point of clarification from Heddle's point too, is in the terms of conditional, do we say, add a caveat of the lease option, I guess,
I
in the
don't-
motion, or?
I don't think you put that in there, I think we just bring a new motion
Yeah.
next meeting,
Just rescind this one or
Yeah.
amend it
Amend it?
amend
yeah.
it.
to increase numbers.
Yeah, I think it's good that we explore those options
Mhm.
right now, so.
Think out loud here.
Okay, any further discussion? I think we're, all in favor? Aye, opposed, abstain, motion passes. I didn't add any future items, is there anything that people?
the expansion reporting, the property discussion?
To the
Is that what
future
you mean by the
items?
future? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a closed, potentially a closed
Yeah,
session.
potential closed session.
The property, closed session, potential, okay. Anything else I should consider? We'll have the lottery.
Will we have the results of, you were checking on with legal?
Oh, from the authorizer? Hopefully, we'll see. It
Okay.
was something, when we get information, we will provide it immediately.
And probably, more than likely, because of the way, when we get legal opinion, there's a lot of stuff that will probably need to be read, that will need to come in and read it. So at the workshop, we'll be working on building out that plan. But
As soon as we know.
as soon as we know something, we'll tell you. Hopefully you'll know before that board meeting, the information, as soon as we get something.
All right. I think that was a really good meeting. I think it was very productive. It's something we should be proud of, so. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Hang on, I have
Mhm.
something to add to the February meeting, just because I've been missing it the last couple of months. Do we have something to celebrate in
Yes,
February?
so I'm working with, we're trying to come up with a cadence and order, and I think, Dan mentioned it, maybe it was at the workshop, I don't know, but, just trying to have a system of how we identify, because it's sort of sometimes started to get to, wait, the board meeting's in 3 days, who are we gonna celebrate? And then it just, so we're trying to, as an admin team, try and come up with like an order, like athletics and 3 times a year, and academics 3 times a year, and maybe employees or other awards 3 times a year. So they're cycled around so that we don't have, oh, wait a minute, I forgot somebody, well, we're all for the custodians. I mean, not that we're not for them. I love them, they're vacuuming wonderfully out there, but, so that we have like some kind of expected order. So I'm hopeful that it'll probably be athletics in February, because that'll be the end of the winter season, and then we'll continue moving forward from there. Because, yeah, I would like to have that too. Hopefully it'll be February, otherwise for sure by March.
Motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second?
Second.
Jill's got you. Stay warm.